Guys, I don't know what happened. One second I was just riding along. Everything was good. I was on a nice twisty road, and then I ended up out here, and I don't know what happened. Like, looking around everywhere, trees. What's good? There's dirt on the ground. I gotta go. I gotta find a dealership. This isn't right. I can't take a Ducati off road. I gotta find a dealership. Okay, Ducatistas, calm down. It's okay. I understand. This is an adventure bike. It can go off-road. I'm just having some fun. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Today, we have something very, very special, the Ducati Desert X. I was not expecting to get my hands on this motorcycle. There are so few of them in Texas right now. There are so few of them out on the road. Ducati is still struggling to fulfill orders, but one fan who did manage to get his motorcycle in volunteered to drive this thing down from Dallas so that I could spend a day in the saddle on this motorcycle. And I am super excited to ride this motorcycle right here because at time of filming, I have just gotten done editing my Aprilia Tuareg video, and this thing, man, it's making a strong case for the king of the Italian middleweight ADV motorcycles. Let's dive on in. All right, let's pull on the highway and see what the power is like. Oh, that quick shifter is good on this motorcycle. Oh, that's good. That is a really nice, notchy, short throw on the quick shifter. Man, modern Ducati transmissions with these quick shifters, they feel so good. Yeah, neutral's a pain in the butt to find on these, but boy oh boy, does that feel good. Let's go ahead and play with the cruise control. So, on, and set. Nope, set is down. Love that. 2-button cruise control. Super easy to use. And let's see here. The wind is coming and hitting me a little higher up than the Tuareg, actually. The first thing I wouldn't need to go and do is buy a new windscreen on this. I would probably add one, but first impressions on the highway for the cruisability of this motorcycle, very good. The Desert X is certainly impressing me right now. So let's cut over to a twisty road and see if this thing wants to ride like the same big supermoto that the Tuareg did. And it's twisty road time on the Desert X. And let me say, first and foremost, this motorcycle's great. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. Secondly, I'm also gonna say there's gonna be a lot of statements that are modified by compared to the Tuareg or versus the Tuareg. I have not ridden another motorcycle besides my KLR between riding the Tuareg and riding this one. So I have a really great basis for comparison between the two right now. And let me just say, also right off the bat here, I think, so I'm not as like, holy cow, wow, amazing, like I was with the Tuareg. And I think what's doing that is because A, I've ridden a 937cc L-twin before, and B, this is a Ducati, so there's a certain expectation that comes with riding a Ducati, and that expectation, for lack of a better term, is superlative riding experiences, right? Ducati is known for being one of the best in the business. So if I'm feeling a little less effusive immediately towards this, that's because I didn't really know what to expect going into the Tuareg. I knew that a Ducati was going to come correct, right? There's no way they weren't. Ducati, say what you want about them. They're expensive. Oh my God, the Desmos. Whatever you want. Their motorcycles don't mess around. And you know what? This bike, it's just like it. This thing, it's pure Ducati. The engine on the twisty roads is so nice. Holy cow, is the power band just awesome. The power band is so fat and juicy in the middle that, you know, you could take this in 6th gear if you wanted to, or you could take it in 2nd gear. Okay, so let's get down to business with this thing. I'm noticing that the front brake, very similar to the Touareg, is pretty soft, which means that, yeah, it's probably tuned for off-road riding. It does mean that you're going to want to carry the brake just a little bit longer into some more tight corners like these. I didn't really forgive it on the Touareg on the street. I'm not going to forgive it here on this motorcycle. I just understand why the front brake is set up like this. Another thing that feels great is the suspension. Holy cow, does the suspension feel good. One bonus for this versus the Touareg, and I will correct this if I'm wrong, but on the Touareg, there's no easy access to a preload knob. So this, it's really, really easy to adjust the preload on. And so I was actually able to get the preload set to me before we even got going. And it just, the suspension feels great. Side to side, it is a little slow. It feels slower than the Touareg did, for sure. But if you're an ADV rider, you're probably not really concerned about absolutely tearing up a twisty road. You're probably the kind of guy who wants to just cruise and be able to get a little bit sporty if possible, and this bike is absolutely willing. Oh God, you can't beat the Ducati sound. I hate that I'm saying that, but the Ducati V-twin, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Oh man, I on a twisty road, yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with this motorcycle. Oh man, okay, before I start putting on my Ducati beret and pulling over for some espresso and stuff, let's see if the Desert X is any good off-road, because this thing is an adventure bike fitted with the same Pirelli Rally Scorpions. Let's see what this thing can do in the dirt. Okay, so dirt lot time. I am going to go ahead and switch this motorcycle straight up into its Enduro Evo. Let it do its thing, and then we're going to see how it handles. I'm most interested to see what the traction control feels like, because the traction control on the Touareg over the rocks in the back, that was getting a little bit squirrely. This is feeling good though so far. I mean, that's no more complicated than a road, frankly, but going through here, yeah, it's doing fine. It's feeling a little bit more ponderous than the Touareg did. This feels like it's more of a full-size ADV bike somehow. All right, here's the rock climb. No, the traction control behaves a lot better right out of the gate. So, going over all this stuff. I'm gelling with this motorcycle way faster. It's feeling good. Again, it feels bigger than the Touareg. Even bigger than the KLR. This feels a little bit closer to, I would say, a small, you know, full touring bike. I don't know exactly what I'd compare it to. but it feels bigger. It feels more, man, I'm not sure. It doesn't feel as quick. Going down over the rocks though back there, it's feeling good. All right, let's step it up a little bit through here. Okay. Wow. This bike does not screw around. If it were me, I would probably end up dialing the engine control back because I know Ducati allows you to do that. In fact, let me see if I can modify that a little bit. Okay, so I actually talked with the owner because I was curious if we could dial it down. No, Rally is the lowest power mode, or Enduro is the lowest power mode. However, I have put it in Rally mode, which is full power. Just to light the back tire up a little bit. Guys, I'm gonna be totally real. This bike is putting down so much freaking juice, holy cow, that I, right now, am not vibing with it off-road nearly as much as the Tuareg. God, this thing just does not mess around. Whew, okay, let's pull this thing over and spend a little bit of time thinking about the specs as well as the pros and cons on this motorcycle, because there is so much to talk about here. Diving on into the specs on this motorcycle right here, this thing is powered by the same V2 that you're going to find in the Hyper Motard, it's in the Monster, it's in the Multi V2. This 937cc V2 is rearing its head in a lot of different places, and it's for good reason. This has a ton of power in a very broad, usable way. It's making 110 horsepower and 68 foot-pounds of torque, which is unfortunately one away from being nice. Despite making some good power, this motorcycle is a little bit heavy for what it is. It's 492 pounds wet, which is damn near that 500, dreaded 500 number that you see on bigger ADV bikes. And you actually do feel the weight on this, especially when you're going off-road. Since we are dealing with an ADV bike here, I will give you the ground clearance. 9.8 inches, which is just a little bit taller than the Tuareg. However, I would not use this motorcycle in such a way that required me to have that full extra 0.3 inches. This I see as more of a gravel road motorcycle. Now, mounting up to give you guys an ergo check on this bike, I gotta tell you, the seat height is super tall on this bike. It is 34.4 inches, which is very tall for a bike. At 6'4" with a 32-inch inseam, this bike fits me great, and I have barely any bend in my knee, and I can flat foot this thing. Any taller, and I would have to be on tippy toes. Now, while we're on the bike, let me stand up and talk a little bit about the standing room on this bike. For my height, it's a little bit of a bummer. I would like to see the handlebars be a little bit higher up, just so I don't feel like I'm leaning over the bars to feel comfortable. That gives me a good segue to dive into the pros and cons on this motorcycle, because while it's a ton of fun to ride, it's not exactly the bike I think that Ducati's billing it as. Let's dive right in with the good stuff. This engine is great. I totally understand why they're putting it in so many motorcycles. I've ridden it in the Monster, now I've ridden it here. The way it makes its power is so broad and so usable, and the transmission feels so good. This is a great engine. Another thing, the looks. I could see somebody not loving the way this motorcycle looks, but for me, this is super duper cool looking. It's that retro future style. It really works for me. Now, looking for flaws on this motorcycle is a little bit tough because you feel like you're splitting hairs, but The throttle on this is not perfect. At neutral throttle between 3 and 5,000 RPM, it can be a little bit surgy. That feels like something you could tune out, but it's a bummer that you have to do it on a bike that costs $17,695.
Mamma mia.
That is another thing that's a bummer on this bike. It is an expensive boy, especially when the Touareg comes in at 12,000 bucks. Another bummer. $17,695, no heated grips on the bike. You do have a button on here which makes me think that at some point they wanted to put heated grips on, but you do have to take this thing back to the dealership and have it installed. I'm not sure if you can just install it at home or you have to take it to the dealership and have them plug in their computer like at KTM, but regardless, it is a bummer that at a very premium price tag, we don't have the heated grips on here from factory. I don't love this bike off-road. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't gel with it right away. I do feel like given time, I could really learn to use it because the tech package on it is so good. The technology feels great. The modes right out of the box are really, really nice and easy to use, really easy to customize, but it just feels like for off-road riding, it's making just a smidge too much torque for me to really gel with. Again, I think given time, it would work really well. However, while this motorcycle may not be the best thing in the world off-road, on the highway, this thing should do very well because its weight is gonna keep it planted. Let's get it on and see what it's like as a commuter.
So what's cruising down the highway like on the Desert X here? Well, very similar to the Touareg. This thing is just a super duper comfy motorcycle. However, because this motorcycle has more of a street bias than a dirt bias, or at least like a hardcore dirt bias. It's doing a really great job just soaking up miles. This is a motorcycle that I could sit on for hours and hours and hours all day. The seat is so comfy. It's super duper comfy on this motorcycle. Now, one nice thing about this bike is because its torque spread is so broad, you can just get around cars no problem. And I'm not even in the full power mode. If I go into the modes here, basically you just press and hold the button and then you get a whole bunch to choose from. There's Sport, which gives you the full power and a little less nannies. You got your Urban, which is a little bit more chill. Then you have your Touring, which actually gives you more power, but also more nannies than Urban, which is kind of interesting. And then Wet gives you the same power as Urban, but with all the nannies basically maxed out. Then you have your Enduro and Rally modes. Much like the Touareg, you can go in and adjust all of the levels if you want. It's actually really nice to be able to go in and set everything up. So if you wanted a more peppy version of the Urban mode or whatever, you can adjust all of that. Or if you wanted to be able to disable ABS in a mode, you can do that. The electronics are tuned really, really well. Now, another thing that's tuned really well is the suspension. I have not played with the suspension at all today. We just put in a little bit of preload before I even got started. And then I rode off-road and I've been cruising and I've been doing twisties. And the whole time, the suspension has been flush. It's been reactive in exactly the way that I want. It doesn't feel like it was going out of control. It's just a really nice, well set up suspension on here. However, you do have cruise control ready to go. You just turn it on by pushing that button and then down to set. And there she goes, cruise control. So one thing that this motorcycle does have that the Touareg didn't have, and if the Touareg did, I must have just missed it, is there's a steering damper right here. Now, I'm not feeling like I'm, using it a lot. It does make me think that at higher speeds, this motorcycle might have a tendency to have the front end wander, but, cruising down the road like this, it's just totally sharp, and it's not going to catch any kind of tank slap or anything like that. Another great mark, and I'm super glad this has an exhaust on it because this is something that always kind of bugs me. When people get super loud exhausts on a motorcycle that's ostensibly meant to tour, it can be a huge bummer because this just droning noise constantly while you're riding. The Termi on this, super well tuned for this motorcycle. I wouldn't do anything more for the exhaust other than just get the Termis. Now, with that being said, I have gotten a ton of questions about this motorcycle ever since I let everybody know that I was going to get my chance to ride this thing. So let's pull over and see if we can answer as many Discord questions as possible in about 8 or 10 minutes.
Let's dive right in with Shawnee Peak. Can the Ducati catch sick air? Probably. Can I catch sick air? That's the real question. The answer, no. Ride Red, what are the advantages over an Africa Twin or 890 Adventure? So what I'm riding here feels very much like a adventure touring biased motorcycle, not necessarily adventure biased. So if you're looking at something like the 890, that is a super hard-nosed, all off-road kind of bike. If you're riding begrudgingly on the highway to get to your trails, that's the kind of motorcycle that you're looking at. Then with this, I'd see it being nicer than the Africa Twin, but then again, I feel more comfortable throwing a Honda at the ground than I do a Ducati. The Cosmic Vagabond asks, I assume you will, but a comparison with the Tenere 700. So, I don't have a Tenere 700 to compare it to. However, I can tell you that this motorcycle is significantly nicer than the Tenere. This thing is, all in all, it's a premium riding experience. It commands a premium price tag, that's for sure. But if you're really looking to ride off-road, I would suggest looking at the Tenere versus the Desert X. This thing can totally do it, but I wouldn't necessarily take it down trails that are more than like gravel 2-lane. Whereas I would throw a Tenere down everything I've thrown my KLR at. 186 miles per hour on a soon-to-be Hornet. Very long username. Does it have Desmos? Yes, it does. So every 18,000 miles, you gotta open up that wallet and pay for the Desmos service. That's actually a really long interval. I don't know what it's going to look like to service them on this motorcycle. However, I do have a bill from an older one that was the air-cooled, and that was about $1,700 bucks. So I would imagine this one's gonna be a little bit north of that because there's a lot more stuff on it. Bussin' on an FZ6. Spite, do you think this is a good bang for your buck bike, or are the cheaper alternatives like the Africa Twin a better option? Again, I think that this is a premium motorcycle, and you gotta understand that. This thing is going to command a serious price tag, but it's a really nice package. So if you want something that is just a well put together bike that works really well on road, works well off road, assuming it doesn't get too technical, then it's worth it. Also, the sound is so good. And everybody's got an Africa Twin, right? Who else do you know that's got a Desert X? T-Jeep DRV asks, is it very different from the Multi V2? Seems like there's a lot of overlap there. So it's basically the same engine, same tune, but beyond that, there are very, very, very big differences. They're very different motorcycles. So while this bike looks on paper like a Multi V2, it's really not. Moto Tigris asks, where does the Desert X wear its weight? High center of gravity like on a Tenere, or low like the Tiger 900? It's a pretty low center of gravity, and that's why I really like it on nice flowy trails. It feels good when you get it moving. However, when stuff gets slow and technical, you really do feel that 5.5 gallon fuel tank on here. It's fine for technical stuff, like as long as you're not going over a bunch of big rocks and baby heads, but there are better bikes. I see this as just a great adventure touring bike. Corgi asking a question here I didn't really think I was gonna have to answer, but we've got a question asking, does the difference justify it over the KLR? So there is a huge price gap. This thing is more than twice as expensive as the KLR, and it is not more than twice the bike. However, I do think it justifies its price tag. The question is, how are you going to use the motorcycle? There are a lot of bikes at a lot of different price points that can get the job done just as well as this thing can. However, you know, as you've seen me talking about the KLR, it's not great on the highway. This thing munches miles like nobody's business. So it really is going to come down to what you're looking for. And again, he's got the same Chick-fil-A, unlimited Chick-fil-A or have the bike argument. This is one where I probably would take the Chick-fil-A. And of course, we have the reliability question here. AF Merce, would you trust a Ducati for something like an enduro/cross-country bike? The maintenance costs alone seem like a negative for a bike that could potentially see a lot of dirt, especially when competing against KLR, KTM's, Africa Twin, etc. Again, I don't see this as competing with the KLR. It does compete with other bikes in the middleweight category. I don't personally see an issue with this as an adventure touring. I keep saying that, adventure touring bike. The reason I keep putting emphasis on touring, it's a better bike on-road than it is off-road. It works really well off-road, don't get me wrong, but it requires more effort to ride it well off-road. I think if you were doing just a nice flowy gravel forest road, the kind of thing that you would see, you know, doing a county road like Montana, that's a perfect off-road experience here, and you're not really gonna end up throwing the bike at the ground when you're doing that. So I wouldn't have any issues doing stuff like that. However, if it gets technical and you start dropping this motorcycle, I have seen Ducatis take some supreme abuse, but I've also seen Ducatis hit the ground and then stop working. So it's a give and take. Me personally, sure, I'd like to see what it's like, but as my only option off-road, I wouldn't go super hardcore. And with that, it is time to get this bike back on the road one last time and start wrapping up my thoughts on this thing.
Now, I'm coming to the end of my day here with the Ducati, and I gotta say, while I've had a good time with this motorcycle, I'm not gonna be sad when I have to give the keys back to the owner. Now, let me explain that a little bit. This motorcycle is phenomenal. It's, you know, Ducati doesn't really make a bad bike. I've said that before. I don't think Ducati has a motorcycle out there in its lineup where you could demonstrably say this motorcycle is bad. You know, they're one of the best in the business for a reason. So all of their motorcycles are really good. You know, they don't mess around, Ducati. And this bike is exactly what you'd expect. It's a really great ride. It's fun on the street. It's really capable. It's comfortable. And on the, you know, lighter off-road stuff, it's a ton of fun. When things get technical, it gets heavy. I'm not gonna lie, it gets real heavy, in fact. So, you know, for the average person who's gonna run out and grab a Desert X, I think it's going to be totally fine. It's gonna do everything they wanna do. And they're going to love it for it. But for me, I think that when I'm looking at getting an adventure motorcycle, I'm looking at something that, you know, for lack of a better term, I can abuse. I can truly just abuse whatever bike. And, you know, I would feel bad abusing this motorcycle. I really would. They'll take it. Ducatis will take it, man. But I don't know. It just, this thing's like a two-wheeled work of art almost. And I'm not looking for that really when I'm hopping on a motorcycle. I just want something kind of fun, and especially when I'm looking to get off-road. I want something that if it goes down, I'm not going to be bent out of shape. Now, let's also talk a little bit about the price on this guy, because that's part of why I'm heeing and hawing over this a little bit. You know, I just came off the Touareg, and at 12 grand, that thing has pretty much everything that this does. It doesn't have the heated grips. This doesn't have heated grips. It's making 30 less horsepower, but it's more manageable off-road for it. It's making, you know, a lot less torque, but again, it's more manageable. It's lighter. So, in a world where the Touareg exists and gives you a lot of the sound that you're going to get out of a Ducati V-twin in a lighter package, I'm leaning a little bit more towards the Touareg. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the Touareg is a better motorcycle. I think that they're very comparable, I would say. They're very comparable. And if you want the Ducati, you're going to get an excellent bike. You're going to get a great bike. But if you're looking for an adventure bike, like a true adventure bike, I think the Touareg is more your speed. This is an adventure touring bike. It's very much like the bigger full zoot ADV bikes. It's not like a middleweight. It's making a little bit more power. It's like it's making the top end of middleweight power, but its feature set and the way it rides and comports itself on the road, it feels like a flagship ADV bike. And you know, when you start comparing it against flagship bikes, that 17695, it starts to make a little bit more sense. And there you have it, guys, the Desert X. It's a excellent motorcycle that I don't want to buy. Now, let me know your thoughts down in the comments down below. What do you think about this motorcycle compared to other middleweight bikes? And do you think that there is something to that idea that this is like a cheaper flagship ADV bike? And of course, before we sign off, a huge thanks to Kent, the owner of this bike here, and Scott for getting me in touch with him. I'm floored that they were willing to drive down to Austin from Dallas for me to spend a day in the saddle on this motorcycle, and I'm so glad that I did, because this was a very good day. I'm super happy I got to spend time on this bike. And with that, guys, I'm gonna sign off. I'll catch you guys in the next one.